Hey there, fifth grade. First day of online social studies. So, what do you need to have? Usually, you'd have a note packet like this that I'd hand out to you, and it'd have different spots for you to write things down. Unfortunately, you don't have that with you though. I did put a copy of this on to the social studies channel underneath files, and you should be able to view it as a PDF. Uh, but since we don't have those, that means take notes, use a notebook, use a pencil, or even if you don't have a notebook, you can grab a couple sheets of paper, staple them together, and kind of make your own makeshift notes packet for chapter 15. All right, so here we have chapter 15, Big Business, Big Cities. Here's our goals for the lessons today and tomorrow. We want to analyze how new inventions helped people, how they affected people's lives in the late 1800s. And then we want to describe the changes in business and the way that that affected workers as well. So, time of invention. In the late 1800s, you have many, many different people inventing many different things, uh, such as the typewriter, the telephone, and Thomas Edison, who created over 1,000 inventions just himself alone. You can see what he's holding in his hand there, the light bulb. That is probably his most famous invention. But he also invented things like the phonograph and the record player. These inventions, they kept machines running longer. They made it possible for people to do more work in a shorter amount of time. All right, here's a few pictures of some of these inventions. On your notebook or on your piece of paper, you can go ahead and write these in there. First, we have the typewriter. The typewriter was not invented by Remington & Sons, but it was first mass-produced by them. Next, we have the oil cup, invented by Elijah McCoy. The oil cup was an invention that was used to help keep machines running smoothly. Oil is a lubricant, and so it makes sure that different parts don't rust up or break, and that they can last longer. This is a strange-looking invention. It's actually a machine used to create something else. This, a paper bag. So Margaret Knight, she invented the paper bag maker. Now people can take their things along with them in a disposable container. Here you have the first early version of a telephone invented by Alexander Graham Bell. And then lastly, you have these two inventions invented by the same person. You can maybe see his name here, Thomas Edison. So in your notes, in your notebook, go ahead and write down each of those people and write down the invention that they created. You can always rewind the video if you didn't get it written down. All right, big business is a huge characteristic of the mid to late 1800s. At this time, you have people like Andrew Carnegie, who creates this huge Carnegie Steel Corporation, which he used a different process called the Bessemer process to create steel more quickly than it was before. And so he built this huge factory that could create all this steel for all these different industries like railroads or skyscrapers, different things like that. He bought other companies along the way, like fuel companies, railroads, and ships. He practiced something called vertical integration. Vertical integration is when you have a company like Carnegie Steel and you buy other companies that your company would need to use. So, for example, he creates steel, but in order to get that steel sold somewhere else, he needs to load it onto ships. And so instead of just having a steel company, he also buys a shipping company. And that way, he saves a little bit of money. Instead of having to pay another company to ship his stuff, he uses his own company. Same with railroads. He can create steel rails for his own railroad company. And then he saves money there. So his steel company was huge. It made 1/4 of all the steel in the entire United States. The other huge name at this time was Rockefeller and Rockefeller Oil. Not oil like oil that you would use for gasoline in your car. Um, he would actually use kerosene was his big company. Kerosene used to have lamps. At this time, you didn't have electricity and electric light bulbs in every home. And so Rockefeller was able to figure out how to create this kerosene and how to use it as a fuel source for lamps. And so his company was called Standard Oil. And then it was a corporation. So you can write down that word corporation in your notes, which is a business that many people own shares or parts of. And these two companies, they kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So Standard Oil, the main way that they grew was by buying smaller oil companies, which means that they could eliminate their competition. When there's no more competition, prices drop. If I'm selling something like Standard Oil and I eliminate all my competition, if I can buy out all the other oil companies because I make them an offer they can't refuse, or because I make my prices so low that they can't compete, then I no longer have a competitor. I can change my oil prices to be as expensive as I want them to be. So he bought so many oil companies, smaller ones, that he almost had a monopoly. You can see Rockefeller in the top left sitting on a barrel of oil that says Monopoly on the bottom. And he's holding in his hand, in one hand, a kerosene lantern, and in the other hand, the world. So he's kind of like dominating everything. And yes, this is where Monopoly would get its name from. No competition, so by winning Monopoly, the board game, you win by controlling all the properties. So you would eliminate all your competition. Here's a silver lining here with both Carnegie and Rockefeller. They both became philanthropists. So that means that they started to give away their money. All right, so that's the social studies lesson for today. Who are monopolies good for? Well, they're good for those big companies like Carnegie Steel, Rockefeller Oil, because they have all their competition kind of eliminated. They can sell their product at whatever price they wish. Who is it bad for? It's bad for those small businesses because they can't compete. If Carnegie and Rockefeller are selling at such low prices that the other companies can't afford to sell at, they're going to go out of business, or they're going to get bought out by those bigger companies. Tomorrow, in social studies class, I'll discuss a little bit about how the late 1800s, this boom with the big businesses, how did it affect workers? Also, we'll take a look at some interesting facts about exactly how rich Carnegie and how rich Rockefeller were, and I think you'll be quite surprised. All right, fifth grade, your assignment for tomorrow. You're going to watch the New Mexico video and complete that state index card. I'll have this hyperlinked in the lesson that I posted in the social studies channel. But to do the assignment, which is your index card, and taking a picture of the front and back of the index card, you'll have to go to the general channel for that. Last thing, read Chapter 15, Lesson 1. So that's on page 534 to 539. We went through the summary of about half of that today, and tomorrow we'll do the second half. So two things for your homework. You have your index card, and you have your reading of Lesson 1 in Chapter 15.